Just as the leader reached for David's shoulder, David spoke, his voice steady. "You don't want to do this." His words weren't loud, but they carried a quiet power that made the biker hesitate, if only for a second. Behind them, the faint sound of sirens began to grow louder, though it was unclear if they were headed for this street. The bikers shifted uneasily, their confidence flickering for a moment. But the leader, unwilling to back down in front of his crew, barked, "You think someone's coming to save you." David's expression didn't change, but the glint in his eyes grew sharper. "I don't need saving," he said simply, his calm demeanor hinting at a side of him the bikers hadn't yet seen. The sirens grew louder, but they weren't what caught everyone's attention next. From the corner of the street, a black SUV rolled up quietly, its headlights cutting through the growing tension. The vehicle stopped a few yards away, and a man in a crisp suit stepped out. His presence was commanding, and he moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the scene before locking onto David. "Major," the man called out, his voice steady and respectful. The word hung in the air, cutting through the biker's bravado. A ripple of confusion spread through the group. David didn't turn, keeping his focus on the bikers. "Agent Daniels," he said calmly. The connection between the two men was undeniable, though its nature was a mystery to everyone watching. The bikers exchanged nervous glances. The leader scoffed, trying to mask his unease. "What's this? Your backup?" He sneered, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Daniels walked closer, his presence amplifying the tension. "Let me put this simply," he said, addressing the bikers. "You've just threatened a decorated Army paramedic who's saved lives in situations you can't imagine. And now you're in my jurisdiction." The group's cocky demeanor began to crumble. The sound of the sirens, now unmistakably close, added to their unease. But what neither the bikers nor the onlookers knew was that David still had another card to play. As the sirens finally reached the street, two police cars pulled up, their lights flashing. Officers stepped out, surveying the tense standoff. The bikers, who had been so full of swagger moments ago, now looked cornered. The leader glared at David and Daniels, his bravado faltering but not entirely gone. Before the police could approach, David raised his hand, signaling them to hold back. His calm authority caught even the officers by surprise. "Let me finish this," he said quietly. David stepped closer to the leader, his steady gaze piercing through the man's attempt to look defiant. "You've made your point," David said, his voice firm but not unkind. "But now you need to make a choice. Leave quietly or face the consequences of your actions." For a moment, it seemed like the leader might lash out, but then Daniel spoke again, his tone sharp. "By the way, this neighborhood has security cameras, and we've got enough footage to make your lives very complicated." He held up his phone, the screen displaying a live feed of their earlier antics. The leader cursed under his breath, his gang now visibly uneasy. "Let's go," he muttered, finally turning toward his bike. The group followed, their arrogance replaced with quiet defeat. As the bikers sped off, the street fell silent again. The officers approached David, nodding in acknowledgement. But just as the tension seemed to dissolve, Daniels leaned closer to David and said, "They'll think twice before coming back, but I'm guessing you already knew that." David allowed a faint smile. Sometimes it's not about force, it's about knowing when to stand your ground. The scene ended with the neighborhood returning to its usual calm. But one thing was certain, no one would forget the quiet strength of the Army paramedic who had stood his ground that day. As the police cars drove off and the neighborhood settled into its usual quiet, a few neighbors stepped outside to thank David. The elderly woman he'd initially gone to check on gave him a warm smile. Her gratitude. In a quiet neighborhood where peace should reign, an unexpected clash unfolded. It all started when a group of arrogant bikers crossed paths with an army paramedic, known for his calm demeanor and unwavering resolve. What began as a simple misunderstanding quickly escalated into a tense confrontation. The bikers, accustomed to pushing boundaries, underestimated the paramedic's background and training. As tensions mounted, the neighborhood held its breath, unsure of how the standoff would unfold. The paramedic, no stranger to handling high-pressure situations, stood his ground with quiet confidence. Yet the bikers, fueled by arrogance, didn't realize they had chosen the wrong person to provoke. This encounter would test everyone's limits and reveal unexpected truths about courage and restraint. The Army paramedic, David, had moved to this quiet neighborhood, hoping for some peace after years of service in challenging environments. Known for his kind heart and steady nerves, he was a favorite among the locals. But the bikers, who had recently started tearing through the streets, didn't care about reputations or quiet lives. That evening, the trouble started when David stepped out to check on an elderly neighbor who had complained about the noise. The bikers, parked nearby, laughed as their engines roared, drowning out any sense of calm. David calmly approached, his tone polite but firm, asking them to lower the noise. They sneered, dismissing him, unaware of the discipline and resilience he carried beneath his calm exterior. As David stood firm, one of the bikers, a tall man with a smirk that hinted at trouble, stepped forward. "You think you can tell us what to do?" He scoffed, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of a few neighbors peeking from their windows. The rest of the group chuckled, revving their bikes for effect. David didn't flinch. Years of facing life-or-death situations had taught him the power of staying composed. "I'm only asking for respect," he said, his calm voice carrying an edge of authority. But the leader of the group wasn't interested in respect. He leaned closer, trying to intimidate David. Meanwhile, a young boy on a nearby porch whispered to his mother, "Why isn't he scared?" The tension in the air was thick, the quiet neighborhood suddenly feeling like a stage for an unfolding drama. What the bikers didn't realize was that David's calm wasn't a sign of weakness. He had faced worse than loud engines and arrogant words. But as they continued to taunt, something in David's gaze changed, hinting that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The leader of the bikers stepped even closer, his smirk replaced with a scowl. "You've got guts, old man," he said, his voice low but threatening. The group erupted in laughter, their mocking tones echoing through the street. David stood still, his hands relaxed at his sides, but his eyes never wavered. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, the tension thick enough to cut.